What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as RideMyAvatar, and today we're just going to be talking nonchalant today about something that's just been irking me a little bit. But let's dive in the video and talk about it. So let's start things off. I wanted to do something a little bit different. We needed to take a look at what is known as the meta state. So again, I have been doing weekly just a glimpse at the meta, kind of looking at locals to major events and stuff like that to kind of give you guys a feel for what's going on. A lot of you guys need to also take into account that Digimon is a very powerful local representation. Store regionals though, I've seen maybe a few hoodie tops in the getting first place, meaning they were officially the thing that got them the invite. Players have adapted to knowing what hoodie needs for a response. And again, the response is negating the fact of being able to play a Digimon by effect. This also helps keep Jessamon in check. This helps keep a few decks in check in the format that likes to spam out, Digimon with their effects. And this kind of makes deck building a little bit different. At the end of the day, it does become a challenge where I understand where the players are, standing at the point of just saying, hoodie is toxic, Jessamon is toxic. These words that constantly come out. Every format, there feels like there's just a deck that people want to just complain about. I know there are a lot of casuals in the game, and that's fine to be super casual. But again, let's take into account there are multiple ways of being a casual, right? There is the diehard casual, which is classified playing the bottom tier deck, and then all of a sudden it gets that splash of support, and boom, all of a sudden super competitive. People are now just complaining and just saying the player is playing something toxic. Well, are you really going to crucify a guy that's been playing, let's take into account, we had red Imperial Digimon. Red Purple Imperial Digimon. Deck was terrible, but there was diehards on that deck for a long time, and then finally it got the best wave of support, and people were complaining about it. People were complaining about the deck right off the bat. It was too expensive to be able to get into. Digimon promos were just outrageous, so you couldn't play the deck if you were late into the fray, or you wanted to be being competitive, and this was the deck you wanted to play. I understand that. That is always a challenge in card games, making the right call, which is why I make market watches to kind of just give you that heads up. Just like a little bit of information, an art, a picture will tell 1,000 words. And I get where that complaint comes from. There are Sukuyamon players. We had support for Sukuyamon back in EX2. Okay? Made it its own, dealt with the plugin shenanigans. It's gotten consistent support trickled in left and right, little by little, little by little, little by little. And then it got busted. Are we going to really punish those players that have been on those decks forever and call them a tryhard, or they're just playing a toxic deck? Toxicity off the player base is amplified by both parties. You want players to play the game, but at the same time, you can't just, crucify a player for playing the deck they want to have. I know a lot of casual players hate that when they're going in, they're just trying to have fun, and all of a sudden now they're facing a tier 1 deck. But again, if it's the deck they like to play, why are we, crucifying them? But then you have the players that are competitives. And again, you're expecting your locals to have this understanding of, well, I'm just playing my rogue tier 3 deck into a field of tier 1s. I'm getting upset that I'm losing. But at the same time, are you adapting your deck to try to mitigate these matchups, or are you just going in with Robbie and just going like, haha, I didn't do well? I think at the end of the day, there is a time and place for casuals. Again, a lot of players, even the high competitive decks players, do have a fun deck. you can ask them to play with you, but don't expect them in their local settings when there is, store credit on the line, packs on the line, prizing on the line, to all of a sudden be like, yeah, I'm just going to play a fun deck tonight. There's always going to be those tier 2 decks that can do well into tier 1s, but then you're expecting the tier 3 deck that can barely hold itself afloat to be able to handle, you can probably handle some tier 2 decks, but then the tier 1s are just going to eat it. That is a issue that we need to come to an understanding that, the casual players, there is a place for you guys, and there is always a place for you guys. You are a representation because you're buying packs as well, and you deserve to be able to play the game you like, but at the same time, you can't also expect players that enjoy the game and want to be a little more competitive to stoop to your level. There's a problem with assuming that you can have your cake and eat it too, right? That phrase is a vital point in some people's mentality, is that I want to have just super casuals and just play that. Well, that's the problem. Is either you need to talk to your local scene and go like, you know what? We're a super casual store. Maybe you talk to your store and go like, hey, maybe can we add a night where it's, casual night? Add another day where you talk to all your player group and go like, hey, would we want a second day? And that's just strictly for, jank night or something like that. This will allow you to have a way of being able to go like, you know what? If there's a day I want to be sweaty, I can be sweaty. Or I can be, we want to be super casual and just have fun. Maybe that's something you need to come up with and talk. Having the frustration that a format is toxic is such an easy thing to scream and shout. Again, we're adults. We're not children anymore. But again, just screaming at the top of your lungs that we're in these weird environments, yeah, I can definitely see where people are saying that. Like, take a look. Hoodie and Jessamon are both one of the most top represented decks in Japan. Why? Because A, there are a best of 1. We are not a best of 1. We are a best of 3 in the United States. So that information changes things up a little bit, allowing players to kind of see the change, right? That Hoodie and Jessamon are one of the more proactive decks that are doing extremely well. We have a lot of decks that are like this, though. Our format is a lot of OTK, hyper aggressive, hit hard, hit fast, and that's just how the speed of the game is at the moment. Unless a massive hit to slow down the speed comes in, the speed of every deck is going to keep climbing. There is no changing course anymore. The speed is there. So either your deck is in the speed zone or it's just in the slow lane. So again, I kind of feel bad for players like that, but at the same time, we have been evolving this way for a while now. There hasn't been any sign of it slowing down because A, it's just not how they're designing the game. This is how Bandai wants to go about it. Ever since BT14, the tempo and speed has changed. There hasn't been really any slow decks. Even taking in the account, like if we go back for decks that just players want to have fun with, if we take a look here, Magnetramon rocks. This deck wasn't the best option to play, but with the support of Magnetramon and the fact that we're getting these things called unique emblems, Gravel Heart, these unique emblems has helped the decks in a way that will help compete. There are decks that players want to play, and I get it. But at the same time, there are players that have been playing Pyramidi when it came out, and they're still diehard Pyramidi fans, and they've been playing the deck consistently. Are we going to ostracize them once their deck becomes that tier 1 deck all of a sudden? No, you shouldn't ostracize players based on that mentality. And I get it. We've only had one major regionals, and, we're not getting another major event until next year. We do have, Actually, no, we have one more event this year. That's in December. But people have been screaming, hit Hoodiemon, hit Hoodiemon, hit Hoodiemon. The problem with hitting Hoodiemon is that it's not Apocalypse level. I'm going to be straight honest with you. The deck is not Apocalypse level. There's so many decks in this format that you have access to that there are competing. You know, Apocalypse, when it first came out in JP, once they've solved it, it was basically, if you saw the top 16, it was 95%, you know, Apocalypse. And then you have Mirage and any deck that could just easily speed class it, right? So, but we're looking at top 16s right here. You know, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different decks plus Hoodie as a option. I think, you know, we got so blindsided by the fact that we think Hoodie is this most oppressively toxic deck that we also forget that the deck is extremely powerful in a best of 1 setting, but once we put that in best of 3, means its cantrips aren't always going to pop off. The deck does struggle in its own existence to pop off like that. Yes, it can top, but again, if the field is claiming that it's the best deck on the format, you're going to see that in a high representation in major events. It's just how that goes. But again, the thing is, Hoodie also has flexibility. Flexibility meaning that it has like 3 to 4 different versions that you can play, one being more option, one more mid-range control, one more, you know, OTK centric, the other one having Venus as his backup top end. You know, there's so many different possibilities, but again, you just have to be ready to tech things against it. We have gotten so far away from option removal, it's not even funny. We have gone the route of consistency central forever. We are just hyper focusing on decks. And again, eventually, what happens when players kind of meet that wall, right? You know, Mugen's another representation of this. You know, it's the wall. You know, your standing is based on the wall. This deck can tank a lot and stop a lot going on so that it actually is a threat. You know, players forget that Machine Dramon is probably one of our more unique style of plays. It's not OTKing or anything like that, but it is an option. You know, Mastemon, Cerberus, you know, this is another deck that is kind of more, you know, unique. It doesn't actually OTK, but it sets up and does some crazy shenanigans with K and Maste for the Cerberus version, but you also have the very stupidly expensive version of Maste, which, again, players have the option to do. But again, you know, you do have Omnimon and Nokia. Even, like, I'm going to be straight honest with you. It's not fun when you lose to a game where, you know, Omnimon Alter S and goes off and just kills you on the spot, right? You know, I get it. I really do. Alter S should probably be at 1, not in multiples, because at least, you know, when Alter S pops off and desyncs, you know, they're not going right back into another Alter S to do it again, right? That's one of the bigger concerns, if anything, is that I get it. I have been smacked by certain decks, and it doesn't always feel fun to do so, but there are times that you just need to adapt your decks a little bit better. And, you know, I am a die-hard Galaxy fan. Most players know that about me. I also am a die-hard Alpha. I love Gallant, but I won't play Gallant at the moment because I'm not... The playstyle is very much not always my favorite. So, but again, I love Gallantmon as well. I have loved, you know, Tamers. Certain decks I own because I love the story and the stuff like that. I will play decks I enjoy. It's not because it's tier 1, it's because I want to play that deck. You know, Galaxy was that big one. I have it pretty much flexing. So, you know, players need to understand that there is just a time and place for decks to kind of just evolve, right? I mean, Crimson Blaze has been the answer for a lot of players to kind of answer, you know, Hoodiemon. Because Hoodie is just a threat. You know, it is a very powerful deck, but you need to know what you're doing against it and be ready to be prepared to take it on. You know, like Mirage slows down Hoodie if they didn't kill Mirage. So Hoodie can't just pop off instantly kill Mirage, especially because we hit magic numbers, and once Mirage is up, you do your one shenanigans to try to get your pieces, and guess what? You're not getting your pieces very comfortably. But, you know, Royal Knights, another deck that they did slap on their wrist to slow it down. But, you know, it's a big Mega Zoo deck. But they did adapt to the Hoodie matchup by adding Keenan. You know, certain matchups you just have to evolve and adapt to. And I really hope you guys kind of take this in a point that, yes, casual players, you do need to be vindicated. Yes, it is challenging for you guys. But you need to figure out a way to not just sit here and just complain. I think a lot more gets creative when you guys can think of a possible solution instead of just waiting for mommy or daddy, you know, Bandai, to fix your problem. If the format is stale, there's always that point of take a small break, come back. You know, once the format is more to your style, liking and everything like that. Never just kill off what you enjoy. Just sometimes a break is needed. You know, eventually your deck will get better and it gets support. You know, adapting, evolving, everything like that needs to happen. And I hopefully, you know, at the end of the day, you guys evolve and change up with your decks as well. You know, and I understand competitive players, you deserve to be able to play your competitive environments. Because A, this is where you get the most reps from. You know, your locals, that's where you're getting your reps from. We do have, you know, nobody can get, you know, Digimon Card Game Online Simulator right now up to the current set. So, you know, with that backpedaled, a lot of competitive players are using their locals as their punching bag again. So you have to take that into account as well. Like, I want players to be happy, but it just feels like sometimes you guys can't be happy on both ends, you know. And I'm not hearing the competitive players shouting as much. I'm hearing it from the casual players that are just saying, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of this, and I'm tired of this. And I get that. It is frustrating. It just is. But hopefully, guys, maybe you guys can come up with some solutions down in the comments. Maybe something that might help other players. What I hope this does is a way of kind of being a way of, yes, you're all allowed to have your opinion and it's valid. But at the same time, you can't just trample on others people's too at the same time. Like, your opinion is valid, their opinion is valid, but you can't just make them feel like, yeah, no, all you're gonna do is get the bite back and the pushback. Again, that's not what we're here for. We're here to enjoy. Life doesn't always end up being the best. You know, life will kick you down 800 times. We're here to have fun. It's a card game. It's here to enjoy. You know, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.